Deputy Mayor Sweeney, you are all set.
Thank you. So I will call the finance meeting to order. And with that, I'll move to item A, and without objection, I move for approval of the minutes from the May 9th meeting. Any objection? Seeing none, that I will move to item B, resolution authorizing the town manager to sign a tax lien assignment agreement for parcel of land known as 18B Deer Run, West Hartford. Mr. Ledwith.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, town councilors, Rick Ledwith, acting town manager. First on the agenda tonight is a tax lien sale for 18B Deer Run Drive. And as outlined in the agenda item summary, Connecticut General Statutes 12-195H allows municipalities to assign liens filed by the tax collector to secure unpaid taxes on real property. We've not collected taxes on this particular strip of land for more than 15 years. And the adoption of this resolution will do two things. It will result in $100 of back taxes paid to the town. And then the buyer of the lien intends to purchase the property and combine it with existing land that is contiguous with this parcel, which then puts this land back on the grand list as a collectible parcel moving forward. At this point, I'll just hit pause and I'll ask our Deputy Corporation Counsel, Gina Verano, to add anything that she felt would be important to add to this dialogue. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Through the chair. So this is an unusual step by West Hartford. I just want to clarify a couple things. First of all, we're assigning the tax liens from 2006 to 2020. It's called the assigned file tax liens. For every tax lien that comes thereafter, the same buyer will have the right to purchase that tax lien as well for the full purchase price. So he can continue to purchase the tax liens that accrue after the 2020 grand list. He loses that right as soon as he elects 1 year not to purchase the tax liens. He has two options. As Rick said, he can either purchase the property or he can seek to foreclose on these tax liens and then get title to the property. I don't know if anybody has any of the specific questions for me.
Can you walk us through why there is a tax lien on this?
Well, first of all, this has been going on even before me. It predates me. And the owner of this property has owned it since 1948. It looks like when I did just sort of a brief search of the area, it looks like the company was involved in a lot of the development in that area quite some time ago. This is somewhat of an orphan parcel. The shape of it would suggest to me that they were trying to perhaps contemplate a road being here. And so all I can think is that they ultimately never built the road and the town never accepted the road. And so the parcel sits and the realty company who owns it hasn't paid taxes in that long. The outstanding taxes even for this time period is only $7,674 and the assessed value is only $3,920. It has very limited market value. To the one side is the current owner who's purchasing this tax lien, and to the other side is the state of Connecticut. And so even if we were to go to a foreclosure sale and foreclosing the liens ourselves, it's very unlikely that anybody other than the neighbor would purchase this.
Are there any questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, we will move forward to the next item. I don't see any objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rick Ledwith, acting town manager. Next on the agenda is an update on our American Rescue Plan funds. The first document we will review is our current funding status, and I'd ask Jerida to bring up that particular document, which will provide us with a history of what we've done with the ARPA funds since we received them going back to last May. Thank you. So you'll recall from previous appropriations that we received our first tranche of funds back in May of 2021. in the amount of $12.5 million in town allocations and $6.1 million in a county allocation. From May of 2021 through January of 22, the council approved $11.7 million of the original $12.5 million town allocation for various projects that are outlined on this exhibit. And then, so that's since from that $12.5 million and we've incurred $11.7 million in expenses, that leaves us with a balance, a current balance of $760,000 of the original town allocation, along with the $6.1 million for the county allocation. Last Monday, we did receive the second tranche of the town allocation for $12.5 million. And are being told that we should receive the second county allocation later this month or sometime in July. So as of this evening, we have a town allocation balance of $13.2 million. So as we move through the second half of this document, there we go, thank you. We've outlined potential projects we could fund with this town allocation, some of which the council has discussed and some of which will be new tonight. You'll recall during the budget deliberation process, you may recall that our police department and fire department had made a request for various vehicles and equipment needed to support our departments and meet the public safety needs of our community. You also remember, in an effort to reduce our mill rate, we had removed these items from the budget, but would request the use of ARPA funds to source the purchase of these important vehicles and equipment for both our police and fire departments. And next up, if we scroll down a little bit more, we do have the funding of the Assistant Director of Social Services position. And you'll recall also during the budget process that the council had agreed to fund the position through ARPA funds for half the fiscal year, and then through the general fund for the other half of the year. And then going forward to fiscal year 24, it would be fully funded through the general fund. And lastly, we have our list of pending original projects. And in previous discussions, we had discussed the $2 million in grants for small businesses and nonprofits, which we will discuss in detail shortly. We also had discussed the wayfinding signage and center reconstruction projects, both of which are in process, but we will come back to the council for an appropriation for those two projects at a later date. We did issue a request for proposals for both projects. And for the center reconstruction project, we have hired Stantec, a local engineering and consulting firm, to assist us with the study portion of that project. But when we get past that study portion of the project, we will be back before the council for the actual reconstruction phase of that particular project. And we are making a decision on the wayfinding signage project shortly as well. Next up, several projects that fall under leisure services, and we have in the past discussed the sustainability projects. So we did talk a little bit in the past about the tree canopy study, the rain gardens, as well as the pollinator gardens. But since then, we have several new projects that need immediate attention. And at this point, I will pause and, through you, Mr. Chairman, go to our Director of Leisure and Social Services, Helen Rubino Turco, who will provide us with a brief summary of those particular needs.
Thank you, Mr. Ledwith. So to discuss, when our ARPA funding first became available, all of the directors, we were all asked to really take a 30,000 level foot kind of review of what are the needs in our community, and how can we use these ARPA funding to kind of make some systemic improvements in our community. And so I really thought hard about some of the things that ordinarily we would fund through bonding or through the capital improvement project process, but they never seem to stay on the list. They always get cut. And I think many things that come to us for CIP are urgent needs, and they're the squeaky wheel. But I think some of the projects that we're describing here that have been approved in the past and continue going forward are items that will improve our community in general, but specifically, they're eligible, they're shovel ready, they're achievable within some deadlines, but they are definitely things that will improve air quality, sustainability, and will help support some of those goals that are in our plan of conservation and development. Some of them are in areas that might normally be funded through a town building improvement, but again, they don't rise to the level of the urgency that we need currently, and so that's why they're on our list. I can answer specific questions about any of the projects that are mentioned.
So, I have a few questions in here, if we may.
Mhm.
So I'm just going back and forth here. So there seems to be a significant amount of money being put down at Rockledge, and I'm just a little caught off guard by that. I don't ever recall talking about somewhere near $500,000 investment needing to be made in Rockledge. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Certainly. Through
Go ahead. Yeah, don't worry about that.
thank you. The HVA system at the Rockledge Clubhouse was put in 1995 when that building was renovated, and it is clearly past its lifespan. It's failed numerous times in the last 5 years, causing disruption to the operations as well as costly repairs. The two air handlers are currently housed in the attic of the building, but the condensing units are outside on the northwest side, and the units can't keep up with the demand in the summer, and they also struggle to heat in the winter adequately. They're not energy efficient. By replacing the units, we would save energy and operational costs, and we also may be able to garner some energy rebates through Eversource. So this is something that we've kind of been cobbling together, limping along, but clearly it needs significant attention.
Mm.
In terms of replacing the irrigation pump, this is really an extension of the pond restoration, the pond dredging that we accomplished in-house. It is the first phase of a much larger irrigation replacement program that you will be seeing on our CIP in the coming years as part of a long-term plan that we have to replace the irrigation system. As you may remember, that irrigation system is way past its lifespan, and we spend a lot of time repairing breaks in the irrigation throughout the golf course. So this part actually is the pump house has a pump in it, and it's next to the irrigation pond. To do all of that work, if we had outsourced it, would have been $500,000, and we're doing it in-house for less than half of that. So in terms of being really economical about where we're placing our funding, we're really trying to put it into places where we can leverage talent in-house rather than having to outsource, and timing of it so that it doesn't interrupt operations.
Okay. We've talked about this numerous times. I still find Rockledge to be slightly concerning with them running a deficit and then us making a $500,000 investment back into them as a capital project. I would love to see them become profitable at some point. I understand that we have to, to spend money to make money, but I still am lost at how we're not making money there, and that we're going to put ARPA money into this, particularly in the clubhouse, which is also privately run, and that we've provided quite a bit of support to that business as well. So that I understand that the HVAC is an entirely different thing, but I would like to talk about how that's a huge investment for us to be putting down basically on a private business, and they're benefiting from that as well. The other things that are on here, and if I'm going to bounce around here, so we'll leave Rockledge where it is. I would really like to hear more about these asks from the police. I'm not sure why we need long rifles in here. Nor do I understand why we need night vision goggles. These all seem to be, and I'm also a little, if I may just be direct with staff here, this was just put on at like 5 o'clock today. This wasn't given, we didn't get any time to look at this. I would have rather had this conversation prior to, but the idea that we're going to buy new long rifles and night vision goggles, as well as a new detective vehicle, supervising vehicles. This is the first that I've heard that we needed these things. I know that we have other, needs here, but this is somewhat concerning to me that we haven't had this conversation. I don't know. This has been brought up in the Public Safety Committee, and I'm not aware of it, but there's a lot on here. I mean, I would hope that this, on the crash study that we're spending $100,000 on, that has something to do with recent events that we're moving in that direction. But I would love to kind of get a little bit more detail on these increased estimated appropriations that we're looking at here.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Rick Ledwith, Acting Town Manager. So we'll go backwards from the vehicle crash study that was also included in our budget process for the upcoming fiscal year. And a decision was made again to remove that from that budget in an effort to reduce the mill rate, and then fund. We did talk specifically about funding that through the ARPA funds.
Yeah, I remember that.
Okay. And then, and similarly with the public safety conversation, we may not have gotten into as much detail over that, but that was something that had come up through the budgeting process as well. And these requests were made by both police and fire very, very early on in the budgeting process. And I have our Director of Finance, Peter Privatera, here as well, who could provide a little bit more background on some of those requests. Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn to Mr. Privatera.
Thank you, Mr. Ledwith, Mr. Chairman. When we asked for capital requests from all departments, these items were requested by public safety. I mean, if you go back and look at CNRE that was adopted, you'll find that there are no public safety vehicles and no public safety equipment, because we had a discussion internally, and I think we might have mentioned it during the budget adoption process that we felt that we were in a better position to use ARPA funding to support public safety than other departments. So we made sure that we pulled all these items out of the original CIP request, with the understanding that we would come back to council at a later point in time and request funding through ARPA funds. Now, if we go back and we look at all the vehicles that police and fire have, if we look at the replacement schedule of these vehicles, we can see that we are very far behind the replacement schedule of public safety vehicles. I know that in some cases, fire has vehicles that they've been driving that, frankly shouldn't be on the road. But, you know, this is basically was our attempt to reduce the mill rate by not including these in CNRE, with the hope that at a later point in time, we can bring these to committee and to council and fund them through ARPA. Now, regarding the night vision and the long guns, we felt it was appropriate to purchase those through CNRE. Now, again, replacement of weapons, long rifles, automatic rifles. I'm not a police officer, and I don't feel comfortable commenting on that. But the police chief made a strong case that he needed some replacement of firearms, and we felt compelled to add it to the list. The same with forensic equipment. So that was a decision that was made by the administration to hold off on those and submit these items at a later date. Thank you.
So can you comment on the vehicles that are in here? Are these all replacement vehicles or any of these new vehicles? That would be great. On the rifles and the forensic equipment, the mobile command vehicle. I'm just a little bit more than more detail would be great.
Certainly. I know all the equipment is replacement equipment. We had talked about that, especially this forensic equipment that was just dated. With respect to vehicles, I know that the support vehicles for the fire department were frankly replacement vehicles. The pickup for investigations for fire, that I believe is a new vehicle because they did not have a pickup, but that just allows the fire inspector to carry their gear from one fire scene, so they have room in a pickup truck to carry all their equipment. With respect to the police department, the vehicles, the detective vehicle is a replacement vehicle. All the patrol vehicles are replacement vehicles. Some of these vehicles, as you know, run 24 hours a day, and frankly, it's going to be hard to get these vehicles anyways. I know that the frontline patrol vehicles that we have, I know there's a significant lead time on getting them if you can find them. The undercover vehicle, even the undercover vehicle, whether it's a Durango or an Explorer, I know that in the past we've had to wait a long time to find the right vehicle. So I think what we're trying to do, what the departments are trying to do, is they're trying to keep up with the replacement schedule as best they can. I did ask John Phillips, Director of Public Works, to give me a replacement schedule on vehicles, and I did notice that there were a lot of vehicles that should have been replaced a while ago that we just have not been able to because of the fact that funding was limited. So I believe, with the exception of the pickup for investigations, I think all the rest of them are replacements, and I believe the pickup is from the chief's perspective, is necessary for investigations. Thank you.
There's just a couple things. One, on the process of this one, I really would have loved to have this like prior to like 20 minutes before the meeting. I think I asked, this got posted at around 5 o'clock today. Second is I do have a little issue with the public safety items coming directly before us and not having the experts in this field to tell us about why we need to spend federal rescue money on automatic weapons, night vision goggles, new vehicles, I think that should probably go before public safety at some point, just so that discussion can be had. I don't know if there are other council members that have questions on these items. Mr. David.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I agree, seeing this just now for the first time, it's a little bit bothersome. And I don't want to really talk about the merits of the individual items because they may be necessary, but I think there's a broader discussion. And I think the discussion we want to have is, I think there really needs to be a discussion of the individual items which are being suggested here on this list to be discussed in the appropriate subcommittees of the council first, so that we can flush this out to see if that makes a lot of sense. I do know from institutional knowledge type things, when we purchased vehicles, especially public safety vehicles in the past, we have either used CNRE money or surplus in the past to purchase like patrol vehicles and things of that nature. And if it was over a certain dollar amount, obviously it was a fire truck or something, we would issue bonds for that, and we would aggregate that over several years because the vehicles cost so much money. What really concerns me is what I've said from the get-go on the ARPA funds was that there's going to be two ways to look at a community and judge a community as to how they spend their ARPA funds. Those communities that are plugging budgetary holes to accomplish results, and those that are looking for economic development, incentives, and things that are going to produce good results in the long run. And I'm hard pressed to find buying things to demonstrate that economic development component. And when we look at the items that we had in our first segment of items that were listed there, the center reconstruction, the signage, some of the other things, those all spoke to economic development and would have in my opinion, a longer lifeline with respect to how it affected the community. When I look at spending dollars from ARPA on depreciable assets, I don't get that same feeling. But I think it would probably just be appropriate just to step back, since we don't really have to decide today. That decision, let it go to the individual committees and see if we can flush this out. I also thought there was supposed to be at some point some discussion amongst us as policymakers to see if there were other things that the community may need or desire, or ideas or concepts that we thought would be good in the long run that we've never been able to finance. So I just, my gut is, I think we should probably just take a pause here. It's good to see that the directors have outlined and the chiefs have outlined priorities for this next bunch of things, but I don't think we've given it the due as a council as a whole to weigh in on it. And I think that these items are just as significant as the items that were in the first batch, and they had a very extensive review as to what we felt were priorities that we approved. So I don't have any questions. I just had that commentary. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And for you, Mr. Chairman, Rick Ledwith, acting town manager. So we will table the public safety discussion, bring that through the public safety committee meeting at its upcoming meeting, which will be July, I suppose. If that pleases the committee, that's the process that we will take this evening.
Yeah, and I would also just I want to kind of hone in while we are here on long-term investments and what we're doing. We've talked about this a lot Helen's heard me talk about it a lot. What we're doing with Rockledge, it's really concerning to me as a town investment. If this is going to be, if the restaurant is going to be privately managed, and continue to take a loss, and then we're going to make a $240,000 investment in that location, I do have an issue with that. I also, I understand that they need to pump to make sure the golf course, which takes on a ton of water, has to operate. That makes sense to me. But I generally, there's a lot of things on here that I generally don't think that when we were first envisioning what we were going to spend money on as a town with American Rescue dollars, we are allocating money here today. I mean, I for one can tell you that I'm not supportive of the town spending money on assault rifles with federal dollars for the American Rescue Plan. That is a non-starter for me. If the police need to go through their traditional realm of doing that, that is completely fine. But that is not what, in my vision, what these dollars were designed for. And nor do I necessarily think, or has been made the case, that we need to beef up our police department at this moment. And I'm not saying that we're in any way going towards a defund or anything like that. I'm just saying at this point, I don't necessarily believe that additional money right now on night vision goggles and long rifles is something that we should prioritize over additional programs for kids, which I have yet to see a whole lot on here, which is one of the things that I think we all discussed early on. We were going to be prioritizing in ARPA money. And then going back to the HVAC, I just really would like to have like a long-term plan of what we're doing with Rockledge. I don't object to spending this kind of money on a profitable golf course. But if we are going to continue to lose money here, I don't understand why we are making a capital investment of almost $250,000 into this place if it's not going to run a profit. So for those, I would just say that we could reserve that for human services as well, and just get a better idea of what we're doing there. But other than that, I think the crash study is obviously very timely with the unfortunate events that took place in town. We definitely need to make that investment. But there are some things in here that just generally feel that need a little bit more discussion. And I think we'd love to have a little bit more of a conversation of what we're going to do with our federal money and how we're doing that to improve upon this community and get us through what is COVID. And I don't necessarily understand, not something I disagree with, don't necessarily understand why we would move these things forward without a proper discussion. So I think we've covered this topic enough, and I think Mr. Lewitt, you kind of understand where both Mr. Davidoff and I are coming from on this. Ms. Fay and Mr. Winograd are present. I don't know if you guys wanted to chime in at all.
Yes, Mr. Sweeney, thank you. This is Mary Fay. I'm not going to be redundant. You guys hit the nail on the head. I do think we need a little bit more discussion on some of these items for numerous reasons. First of all, the necessity level, which you both have spoken of, as well as we need to make sure that whatever we're spending this money on, that it's going to withstand a lot of scrutiny and, it's high level of accountability to it. So I'd like to understand more how it fits in within the context of ARPA funds. So I agree with both Lamb and Leon.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rick Ledwith, Acting Town Manager. We will table those topics and discuss them through both our Public Safety Committee as well as our Human and Leisure Services Committee about the necessity of each of these requests, and then a further discussion in terms of the appropriate venue to fund these particular projects, whether that would be ARPA or through our existing surplus or some other form of funding.
Thank you.
Heard
Thank
your
you.
message. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just generally, can we just try on the documents to, if we're gonna upload the agenda on Friday, let's try to have the documents attached with them on Friday.
Sure. I thought that was up on Friday. I could be, it wasn't.
No, the items attached weren't available till today.
Okay. So at this point, we'd like to turn our discussion to the small business.
Mr. Davidoff, sorry, go
Oh,
ahead.
I'm sorry, Mr. Davidoff.
Sorry, Mr. Manager, before we move on, I'd like to be able to have an opportunity as policymakers to provide additional suggestions for items on the agenda. I can probably just rattle off the top of my head 3 or 4 right now I thought about. I thought parklets were one. I thought various types of beautification projects are 2. I think improvements to the Hannock neighborhood would be another. Dog park keeps coming up, and that's something that enhances community life. And in a lot of communities, they talk about community refrigerators and additional food pantry sites. So those are things that I've seen other communities do. Those are, I probably could list probably another dozen if I had time to think them through. But I just want to know that I would welcome the opportunity to be able to have that discussion, to brainstorm, and to have that ability to bring those forward. I think in the short term, they meet the needs of our residents as they are as we're coming out of COVID. And some of these things, like parklets and beautification projects, will go a long way to enhance an area and make it more attractive for economic development, whether that be tree plantings or bushes or flowers or things like that, or just having that ability to do that. I think will be helpful, whether it be benches. There's a lot of different public amenities we could be looking at, but it's just going to need time to think through and work through. And I really thought that's what the ARPA dollars were going to be used for, something that was concrete that you could point to, not something that we could normally just put in our budget and accommodate. I do understand building and such as the HVAC. I understand the irrigation system. I understand that those are all necessary components to make a program or a facility operate, because without them, it doesn't operate. So I get all that, but I just think that there's more to this picture here. Another thing that just came to mind: there are places where crosswalks need to be improved, or we do those beacon lights. So there's discussion of other locations in town, and people occasionally write us and say, geez, I have to go the entire length of this street that's miles long before I have an ability to safely cross the street. So I get it. I hear those things, and those are things I think if we had more time and a venue to do that, I think that would probably be appropriate. So
yeah,
that's it.
Why don't we do this, Mr. David? I think at the next meeting we should reserve space for that. I think we've talked about it. I think we have all the members here. I think at the next meeting, I would ask that people come with ideas to suggest to staff, as opposed to listening them off. Which, Mr. David, I agree with pretty much everything you said, but I think we all want to have a little preparation for that. I generally am supportive of the town using money for one-time, events. I also want to make sure that we have a big development that is a once in a generation coming down the pipe with the Elmwood Community Center, and I know that we have to spend this money at a certain rate. But I know that we have that process going independently of this. And I'm not sure how we would line item stuff for that, but I want to make sure that costs that are associated with that down the road are something that we're leaving room for investment in the short term, whether it be on need for additional renderings or any kind of thing that we're going to need to spend, directly on the creation of this community center. I think falls directly into the actual, to Mr. Davidoff's point, the need of the idea of ARPA was to give communities an ability to bounce back from COVID, and I think kind of thinking about that and generating and reserving some money for that is something that we should think about strongly, as opposed to just getting it out the door, because I think we have a little bit of wiggle room. But I just want to, I know that I'm sure I can be persuaded in a different direction, but I want us to think about that long term as well. So I know that, because those are going to be costs that we're going to have to bear at some point. But those are kind of what, when we originally talked about this funding, was kind of more of the direction I thought we were going to go in. I really love on the stuff that we're looking at, was on what we're doing for signage and things of that nature in town to really push us. And I think when we originally talked about this, was giving us a significant leg up in economic development and the growth of the community. And I appreciate the things that are on here. I just don't know if they properly fall into what we're looking to accomplish. So with that, I will move on. I think we've covered this topic quite a bit. And I don't see any other folks. So with that, I believe we just go into the staff reports.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rick Ledwith, Acting Town Manager. So at this point, the next several sections of the agenda are tied to the small business and nonprofit portion of ARPA. And with me tonight, we have the members of the team who've been working hard over the last few months to develop the Town of West Hartford Small Business and Nonprofit Recovery Grant Program. And we have our finance team, Peter, of course, Patty Lewis. We have Helen, who's joining us, as well as Kristen Gorski, who's our Economic Development Coordinator, who will play a key role in our outreach to our small businesses and nonprofit organizations. So we have uploaded a few documents for your review and consideration. We have a draft of our guidelines. We have a draft of our applications, as well as a draft of our potential timeline. And I do want to thank Patty Lewis for her work and the original drafting of these documents, and then the work of our committee as a whole as we continue to modify and amend these documents. So I'll start by providing a brief summary of the program, and then the team will be available for questions. So the Town of West Hartford Small Business and Nonprofit Recovery Grant Program is established to provide limited one-time direct financial assistance to eligible Town of West Hartford small businesses and nonprofit organizations. And these small businesses and nonprofits would employ 50 full-time employees or less, and obviously would have been adversely impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. There are two types of grants available. There's a COVID-19 Relief Assistant Grant, and then a new or enhanced program assistance grant. And each grant is up to $10,000 each. Examples of a relief assistance grant would be mitigate financial hardships, decrease revenue, increase costs, payroll, benefits, mortgage, rent, those types of issues. Certainly could be used for prevention or mitigation tactics, which would include barriers that organizations have had to put up, partitions, cleaning efforts, would include technical assistance and support recovery programs, And then it would also include costs associated with outdoor dining areas, and then overall compliance with public health measures. Examples of newer enhanced program assistance would include supporting recovery programs, mental health services, crisis intervention, substance abuse treatment, housing, marketing campaigns, and informing public on how to receive help from area nonprofit organizations. And then, Dryde, if you could pull up the timeline that we attached with the agenda as well. Thank you. And we can use this to kind of guide the rest of our conversation. So for our Finance and Administration Committee was in agreement, we could appropriate the next tranche of funds at the June 28th meeting. So we'd essentially be appropriating $2 million for our small business and nonprofit grants. In the interim, we'll work with our Information Technology Department to set up a website that will be housed in our economic development portion of the website. We have established an email for questions that would be addressed by Patty and by Kristen. And then we would begin work with Renee McHugh to issue a press release in early July. And we would essentially hold information sessions with our small businesses and nonprofits who would be eligible to attend and to learn more about the programs. We would launch essentially the application process on June 20th of 2022. And then we would have an initial deadline of August 10th for applications to be submitted. And then we would begin the application review process following August 10th over the next 2 weeks. We'd have an internal team, which would consist of everyone you see on the call tonight, Peter, myself, Helen, Kristen, Patty, Lisa Newton would be part of that committee as well. And then we would have 2 residents who would be part of that committee as well. So that committee will review the applications and essentially be awarding up to $10,000 grants for each application that receives a positive review from the committee. And then we would be back before the council with a final decision on, and it probably wouldn't be on September 1st. It would probably be at that first council meeting in September, where we would notify the council of all the awardees, and then we would be in a position to issue those grant awards to the recipients. If we didn't receive enough grant applications for that $2 million, initial $2 million grant award number, then we could certainly receive applications after that August 10th deadline until we were to utilize all of those funds. I do, based on some feedback that we have received from organizations out there, we do think there will be a significant demand for these grant programs. And I believe, where are we now, Kristen? We're at about 2,400 brick and mortar small businesses located throughout the town, as well as nonprofits. So again, I do think there will be significant demand immediately for these funds. So I will hit pause right there and turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman, as well as our other town councilors to answer any questions that folks had.
Yeah, this is great. Can you explain to me I haven't had the opportunity to go through this document yet, the role that the chamber is going to play in this?
For you, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it over to Kristen Gorski, our Economic Development Coordinator, who can talk about her relationship with our chamber and the role that they will play.
Great, thank you, Mr. Ledwith. Kristen Gorski, Economic Development Coordinator. So the Chamber, as they do with, quite honestly, everything that we have put out there since the beginning of COVID, I do anticipate that they will be able to help support the outreach portion of the program by communicating this opportunity to their businesses. And then, in baseline conversations that I've had with them, they would also like to be able to have potentially a separate informational meeting that would be sponsored by them, separate from the two that we have presented on the timeline, just to probably under their Economic Development Committee, and just to make sure that all of their West Hartford based businesses are well aware of the program. And they also play an incredibly active role within all of our business associations and neighborhood associations. So partnering with them to make sure that we bring this information to all of those associations as well. And I would expect, as they are eligible, they likely would be an applicant in this program.
Okay, okay, so it has demonstration, so the application, I can see that in here. Mr. Davidoff, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you. I think this is wonderful, and that this should get onto the council agenda for the second meeting of the month here, the 28th, I believe. I'm quite aware of the program in Newington where my business is, and they only allocated $500,000 for small businesses, and it was a $10,000 max per business. So when you do the math, it was like 50 businesses could get $10,000. Not everybody, I understand, qualified for the max. Okay, you had to demonstrate through the application what your rent was, what your utilities were, what your decrease in revenue was, where you stand, and what's your plan, what's your marketing plan, what COVID expenses. And it wasn't a negative if you had received PPP or other types of assistance. That wasn't, because to be totally honest with you, I just know firsthand from myself and others that we're still struggling. And it's kind of funny to me to hear 50 employees or less. We're really should be targeting the people that are like mom and pop solos and 2 or 3 people, the family owned businesses, because if you have to rely on the $10,000 grant from the town of West Hartford for a 50-person business, it's not going to help you too much with respect to, definitely not to payroll. It might cover maybe a month or 2 of some type of utility bills. So in this particular case, if we did have everybody max out at the $10,000, it would be 100 small businesses that we would be able to help. But if my math is right. So, and then on the nonprofit, the same thing. They've had the exact same struggles, and I think a lot of their struggles. I'm involved with the symphony. My wife's in the chorale. A lot of their issues is the ability to let the community know about their performances and to keep those performances safe. A lot of people, for example, in the chorale, I just went to their concert Friday, are elderly people. Now that I consider myself elderly, they all wore masks, okay, because the population, they still felt they were still vulnerable. And I've been going to these concerts for the last six years or so. This was probably the least attended concert that I've been to. And I think a lot of it was the inability to get out to the community to let people know that this was even happening. The same thing with the symphony. They just had their concert in May at Kingswood, probably one of the smallest turnouts ever. And I would say the ability to get that word out to people. With respect to the participants, they are just as enthusiastic, as committed to their organizational goals. The people who run these 2 organizations in particular that I have knowledge of are more dedicated than ever to succeed. And they've had to overcome so many hurdles that I'm surprised they're not totally burnt out. So whatever we can do to assist them, I think it is wonderful, because in the nonprofit, and I'm just talking in the arts, I know there's a lot of different other types of nonprofits, but they are so crucial to the survival of our community and the functions that they provide, and the services that they provide and the programs that they provide are so necessary to our community. It's what makes our community a community. So some of them are aware of it, but the key, as Kristen rightfully pointed out, will be sort of having the chamber serve as an ambassador to spread that word to people, and get that out there, because it could be the lifeline that they're looking for. And in the retail sector, the summertime is probably the worst time in a lot of retail businesses. People are away, they're not going shopping, gas is becoming $5 a gallon, they're not driving around, so bricks and mortars are having a difficult time. So I think we also, when we launch this, it's important that the message that we get out is one that shows that we are in tune with the business community and in tune with the nonprofit community, that we understand that you're still struggling, that things are not back to the way they were pre-COVID. And we understand that if we had $1 million to give to each one of you, we'd love to do that. But this is a small token of you're important, you're needed. We appreciate what contribution you make to our community, whether it be in the business or the nonprofit sector. And we want to see you succeed, because when we all succeed, we're a better community. So, and then I'll just point out in the Newington one, after they dispensed the funds, and it was pretty private, which I thought was pretty good too. Nobody really needs to know everybody's business in that sense, but I guess somebody could do an FOI and find out who got what and how much they got. When you're all done, you have to submit an affidavit of how you spent the dollars. And I thought that was a really good requirement. For my particular circumstance, it probably won't be due till it has to be within 6 months. You got to use the funds within 6 months. So it came in April. I think the 10th month's October. And you have to outline, this is what I paid in rent, this is what I paid in these utilities, this is what I did for marketing and whatever. And it was very helpful because you were able to reach also contacts in the town hall to find out what were eligible expenses. And I think that's really important, because there's nothing worse than going through the entire program, okay, keeping track of the way you spent the money, and then you find out, oh, that wasn't a covered expense, okay, and what are you going to do, because there's no more time left, and then you'd have to repay that. One thing about business people and people who are running these numbers, we don't want surprises. So whatever we know on the front end, we'll try to be law abiding and get us all the way to the end. And since it's a grant, there has to be accountability as to what happened. And I think this is the right thing. Whether or not this could be a rolling admissions thing, that maybe we could entertain that. Maybe if all the money isn't used up by that deadline. Our goal is we're setting aside this money. We want it to be used. We don't want to say at the end of the day, oh, well, we only gave out $500,000, and people are like, well, I didn't know. Oh, there was money. Oh, it's too late. I think that probably sends the wrong message. So if we could think of that. And then the other thing that I did talk to the mayor about was some of our nonprofits are struggling with capital improvements as well. So maybe that we could set aside a different bundle of money for capital improvement or expenditures that they would need in terms of the longevity of their organization. I know that in the past, and we constantly get thanked at all their concerts. We helped the Women's Corral, and we purchased them risers, so the people can stand at various heights and be heard and be seen. And in the past, they always had to borrow them or rent them, and now they own them. And at every concert, they say, "Well, we'd like to thank the town of West Hartford for, purchasing these much-needed risers." And what's really incredible with the riser thing, and I'm sorry for belonging to this, is the volunteers there. They bring them to the site because they don't really have a location there. They sing in the St. James Church on Farmers Avenue. So volunteers bring these risers, they set them up, and when the concert's over, they take them home. And like I said, most of the people that are in this women's corral are older than me. So it's usually the spouse of the singers doing it. And it's quite commendable to see that people are appreciative of what we've been able to help them do. And so I'm 100% behind this proposal. I don't think we should wait any longer to enact that. I don't need any further discussion at a council table to hear that idea. I think this is a fabulous idea. I'm certain Kristen, with all her contacts and with all the executive people in the decision making, I have full confidence that you'll be able to see a worthy application, and I believe most of them will be very worthy applications. And I think we will generate so much goodwill from this program that I think in the end we can even publish stories on how the grant kept us going, and that's what I'm hopeful for. So thank you for listening to me, and I appreciate all the effort. Thank you, Patty, for step one on getting that application going. But it is that lifesaver. You know, you send somebody a lifesaver while they're just, you know, in the water, you know, struggling to stay afloat, and that's what we need.
Thank you, Mr. David. I totally agree that we should get this moving as soon as we can. I think there are some concerns about people not paying attention as much in the summer, but I do think that we can figure out a way to do that. And I think if Mr. Davidoff's point is correct, you know, with kind of a rolling emissions, that will help that process. I would also like to reserve the opportunity for if the council sees this doing really well as potentially adding additional funds to it if needed. You know, there are a lot of small businesses in town, and I think we've all had our own interactions with them. I personally have had my own interactions with other businesses across the state. Inputs are at a all-time high right now for small businesses, and that hurts. You know, if your delivery service, you know, you are paying a lot more to do your job right now, and that goes across the board. If you're manufacturing anything in town, which we do have a few of those, just inputs are at an all-time high. You know, inflation is at an all-time high. The quicker we can get this out to folks, you know, in some extent, the need may be more dire right now than it was in the heart of COVID because of the federal assistance. You know, this is real hurt right now. There is no longer that federal assistance, so obviously this would be in the form of that. But I think that we should strongly consider keeping the door open for potential additional funding if this program goes as I think it will. I think this is exactly what we are supposed to be doing with this money and giving it to people that need it to keep our community strong. So it's just something that I would consider down the road. With that, Kristen, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. I just wanted to give a quick snapshot, and I think that this really speaks to a lot of what you and Mr. Davidoff said. So Mr. Ledwith had said we have about 2,400 businesses, but when you really dig down, so the most recent data that we have from Connecticut CT Data and Advanced CT is that we have 2,300 employers, about 2,400 brick and mortar businesses, but active total businesses in West Hartford is at 7,900. And so that includes, you know, all of those businesses I listed, plus solo entrepreneurs, plus nonprofits, because, you know, nonprofits typically a lot do not run on staff or have, you know, one full-time staff person. So there's a lot of businesses that we have, a lot of nonprofits that we have, and I think that those numbers are really great. And I think especially what I've heard, certainly where this could be helpful is not just the businesses that you engage with and interact with that are brick and mortar, but out of that 7,900, you know, certainly the nonprofits, but the solo entrepreneurs, some who may have had to put that business on the shelf during COVID to have to go, you know, work at another job. So this could really be, you know, kind of a lifeline to be able to bring that business back where people were really struggling throughout the pandemic. So I just wanted to give you a couple snapshots or quick data there.
Thank you for that. That's super helpful, and just kind of quantifying the need that we have in town. And if we just take, just general law of averages to apply to those numbers, I think, there's a significant need. And I do think that because of the makeup of the town, that, people are very inquisitive here. They will find out about things, and we'll have a slew of people applying for this. So, with that, I again, I don't know how we would do that, Mr. Ledwith, if we how to keep the kind of the back door open to this program in regard to adding additional funding to it. But it's something we don't have to decide here today, but just something that we can consider down the road.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. We will, like I said earlier, we'll have that application deadline. And then assuming we don't have enough applications to utilize the $2 million, then we keep a rolling application process open until we utilize all of it. And one other point, so we will present a resolution at the June 28th council meeting appropriating the $2 million to Mr. Davidoff's earlier point regarding infrastructure or facade improvements, capital improvement plans, just for purposes of discussion. If Finance and Administration Committee wanted us to, we could set aside, an additional $500,000. We still have time to include that with this initial application process as well. So that would be something we could add to that resolution if the committee felt inclined to do that at this point.
Yeah,
I put that out there for discussion.
I think what I was saying is that even further than that, as opposed to creating an additional thing to apply for, if we find this to be really successful, and that to Kristen's point, we have 7,900 small businesses or entrepreneurs in town, and the need is larger than we originally thought for. Giving the opportunity for the council to move additional ARPA money into this fund, and to say move it from 2 to 25 to 2.5 million or something along. I'm not saying that's what we're going to do, but keeping that door open, because we just don't know how the economy is right now. I mean, we have a general idea. It's not great, particularly for small businesses, but the scale of need that will be out there, and if the need to help our small businesses overruns some of the capital projects that we would like to do, I think that's something that we should keep the door open to. So with that, we'll move to the projected operating results as of March 31st. Mr. Protera.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The projection is identified as of the end of April, but we made some additional adjustments to it because we are realistically coming towards the end of the fiscal year, and I wanted to present a more realistic projection. As you can see, we're in great shape. We're projecting a $2.2 million surplus. And my expectation is that before we close our books this fiscal year, that number will increase. We did very well on our revenue collection. We're about $3 million over the adopted budget, roughly $2 million over in tax revenue, whether it's current levy, motor vehicle taxes, prior taxes, and liens and fees, all above our expectations. Our intergovernmental revenue is increased by $713,000. A combination of FEMA, some additional grants that we received on Dial-A-Ride. We did receive some additional ECS money, and again, some additional grants that we normally see every year for public safety. Charges for services, when we talk charges for services, we always talk about building permits, conveyance taxes, and again, fire plan reviews. We're projecting roughly $481,000 over budget. Our miscellaneous revenue is down by about $285,000, but it's better than it was 6 months ago when we were projecting, because it was based on our interest income. And I think, as you all know, interest rates are going up. early on in the year, we were probably receiving 15 basis points on our investments. Now, I believe the state treasurer's investment fund is at 98 basis points. So we're maximizing our interest income, but doing it cautiously on secure investments. The only other area that that I don't have in here, but I know that there was some discussion about trying to recoup some of the losses associated with the flooding event. I know Corporation Counsel's office has been working on that. So my expectation is the next time I submit a report, there may be some additional revenue related to some sort of settlement in that area. On the expenditure side, we're roughly $734,000 over budget. The two big drivers are police and fire. Again, a combination of overtime because being short-staffed, and also payouts to the retirements. If you recall, the last couple of years, we had some significant payouts due to retirements. This year, it looks like we're going to be around, excuse me, $700,000 for all retiree payouts, which is very reasonable and within our projections. Leisure and social services, again, over because of that significant flooding event. Non-departmental, again, if you recall, because of all the labor settlements, we projected all the payroll increases in departments, and we reduced our contingency account proportionately to balance it all out. The Board of Ed is projecting a $50,000 surplus this year, so we're including it in our numbers as well. All in all, I think we're in great shape. We did receive, or we're projecting greater savings in, for instance, Public Works, because we had some significant money left over in our snow account. We didn't use as much money as we had in our contractual services account, and I think we're in a good position. My expectation is that once we get close to closing out the year, I'll be submitting another report with roughly final numbers, and then the town manager will make a recommendation to council on the allocation of the surplus. We may come back before we close the books with one more appropriation request just to balance out the budget. But we should have a significant surplus by the time we close out the books. And I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone has.
I do not. We talked about the human services thing to significant extent. I don't think that needs any more debate. And both the police and fire news is not really news anymore. It's kind of what we expect.
Mhm.
And I don't have any further questions. I don't know, Mr. Davidoff, doesn't look like you do. Ms. Fay?
I'm good right now, Liam. Thank you.
Okay. So just for number 5, I will move to adjournment in a moment. Just for future agenda items, I would like for members of this committee to do a little homework for the next meeting, so we can talk about some items that people do want to talk about as potential items to be considered for ARPA funding. I know that our caucus will be meeting prior to the council meeting. I don't know, Mary, if you want to bring that up with your caucus as well, some suggestions that some of your members may have that
That'd
we
be great.
can bring up at our next council meeting or our next finance meeting. So with that, if there is not an objection, I will move to adjourn and see most of you tomorrow night.
Have a good night.
See everybody tomorrow. Thank you.